Is the bear bad now? That's the charge of a provocatively titled Slate article that's been doing the rounds as the dust's been settling on the third season of FX's prestige streamer. It's impossible to ignore how bad the FX hit has gotten, the article boldly begins. And half of you watching are probably bristling at the suggestion. What do you mean, is the bear bad now? This is one of the most exquisitely made, soulful shows currently airing. Season 3's been some of the best television of the year. It's currently sat at 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. But the other half of you are probably saying, thank you, someone's finally saying it. Sure, it's on a 90% critic score, but look to the right. Oh, and this isn't really within that fandom pop culture sphere either, so that does actually reflect viewer experience to some extent. This year was a letdown. It was the year the bear got lost in the sauce. It was not a good season. Real quick, why not let me know which half you sit in? I think it would be interesting to see the proportions of that split down below. You done? You waiting for me to validate one side and piss off the rest? Sorry, guys. I think you're both right. And I think the fact that you can both be right here is pretty interesting. So today, I want to talk about this claim and that Slate article in some depth. I think it provides a good vehicle for discussion of the show and of how we watch TV like this more widely. So let's do that right after a word from this video's sponsor, Aura, the all-in-one online security service. Look, it's 2024. The internet's basically becoming a bloated corpse of spam and glue pizza recipes. We all know this. Your information's out there, my information's out there. Look at this scam text I got just the other day. Wrong gender and age this time around, but I know people that have fallen for this type of thing. And it's not just the scammers that are letting the class down. The companies who hold our data all too often do nothing to protect it. You know what can though? Yeah, Aura. Aura alerts you when your data's been breached or leaked on the dark web. It gives you fast fraud alerts if someone's used that to try and access your bank account, and it automatically removes your data from data brokers so you get less spam. Not today, fake child who can't remember my gender. And that's just the start. You also get transaction monitoring, a VPN, an antivirus, a password manager, and a bunch more tools. That's all in one app for one affordable price. So if you're sick of being digitally haunted by bad actors, if you want to secure your data, why not head to aura.com/pillarofgarbage and try your first 2 weeks for free. Links in the description. But let's talk about the bear. Before we get into the discourse or try to pass any definitive judgments, I feel it'd be helpful to kick off the video by giving you all a sense of where I'm at with Season 3. For me, the peaks this season, Ice Chips and Napkins, that is the sugar and Tina-centered episodes, are on the same level as the show's prior highlights. I don't necessarily think either is better than, say, Forks or Fishes, but I do think they're in that conversation. Zooming further in, I also don't see much of a quality drop-off at all in the moment-to-moment texture of the show. The dialogue still cracks like a whip, the cinematography remains punchy and lithe, able to bring us in and out of our characters' heads, to make a space feel cool or hot or fragile or furious, and, of course, to make stomachs rumble all over the world. Season 3 is as able as ever to craft those cathartic moments, or to set the restaurant on a minutes-long simmer that boils the cast down to their most dysfunctional traits. The intensity is still there, as are those hard-won moments of release, and those crushing bits of almost progress. But yes, like most other The Bear watchers I've spoken to in the past couple of weeks, my reaction to seeing the credits roll on Forever was essentially, that's it? There is a sense in which Season 3 is like one of those fancy dishes we see so many of, exquisitely crafted but somewhat insubstantial. It doesn't really fill you up. Moment to moment, the experience of watching this show is a rich one, but when the curtains are drawn and the lights go out, you're left a little unfulfilled. And the biggest reason for this is the fact that so many of the plot threads are left dangling. Sure, one of these threads kind of got resolved, the review, but we still have no idea what the consequences of that will actually be. I think we all know that Season 4 won't be a set of episodes detailing Uncle Jimmy's sale of the lot, and even that moment of partial resolution was frustratingly unclear. As for the rest of it, the Claire fridge fallout continues to fester at the end of episode 10, Richie still hasn't RSVP'd to Britta's wedding by the end, and we're not really any the wiser as to what's going on with Sid either, vomit-wise. We don't find out whether she's staying or going either, and so on. And as much as I enjoyed some episodes, I'll say it, that doesn't make for a satisfying season. The Slate piece is, of course, interested in all this non-resolution. It observes that by the season's close, even the barest narrative stakes remain bafflingly opaque, and the core of its thesis follows. In the absence of any substantive storytelling progress or character development, the show now exists as a sort of composite of mannerisms and affectations that it hopes its audience will mistake for good television. The article also makes it clear that it considers this to be the culmination of a slide that began in the generally beloved second season, as the show began to double down on those mannerisms and affectations like non-linearity, liberal use of supposedly obvious musical choices, and cloying cinematography. What's imagined here, then, is a show continuing to perform television as it withers away, until its audience is left clapping for an empty stage. The notion of a hoodwinked viewership, a culture more concerned with being seen to enjoy the good shows than engaging in honest discussion, is central here. The bear cannot fail, the bear can only be failed. That's the mistaken thought people are having, so saith Slate. And I'm not going to dispute that in Season 3, the moment-to-moment stuff, the presentation, the vibes, the how retains its vigor even as the what loses some. But I don't think that fact reveals that the bear is a Skinner box, that the viewership's mistaken the performance of TV for TV itself. I think it just tells us that clear resolution and narrative aren't all important. No, I didn't feel satisfied when the credits rolled on that last episode, but I certainly had been satisfied in the moment throughout. Maybe the show's style and feeling is a substance unto itself. Maybe if television is performed well enough, the ritual succeeds. In the eyes of the article, this is all a dressing that people got attached to because there was this quality narrative substance underneath, a dressing whose continued presence camouflages the fact that this substance is gone, misleading audiences to defend the bear. The bear was good at some point, Slate grants, but apparently this how, those vibes, the grain of the bear was never why. But can't it just be that these things were a part of what people liked, of what was good all along? In one of the best episodes of Season 3, the premiere episode, Tomorrow, nothing happens. That is, there's practically no movement forward in terms of the show's overall master narrative. We see Kami cleaning up the bear from the events of the Season 2 finale, and we see him drafting his list of non-negotiables, but those are the next episode's topic. Narratively speaking, the season could have skipped Tomorrow entirely. Everything would make sense if we picked back up with Next instead. The meat of this episode is the flood of disordered flashback scenes that surround that cleaning, that drafting, but we don't really see anything in the past that we didn't sort of know about already. This isn't its own story, a la Fisher's, it's just the show painting an emotional picture, using the past to let us into Kami's mind in the present. And that process of painting is kept engaging for 35 minutes by details. The little snaps of dialogue, the way you can feel the grime and smell the food, the way the soundtrack contracts and relaxes in step with the episode's tenor and repeating patterns. And I say soundtrack, not score, because this is a needle drop too. It's Together by Nine Inch Nails. You're engrossed in the particulars of the pea podding, the deep cleaning, and the little status games that play out again and again in the kitchen, in every kitchen, and gradually, from this sea of detail, meaning emerges. The Slate article, presumably in reference to Tomorrow, writes, filling in backstory shouldn't be confused with character development. But this isn't character development, it's character exploration, and it's a hypnotic, beautiful exploration, an exploration which offers a gentle reorientation of Kami, what he's doing and why in the viewer's eye, ahead of this third season, and that idea of legacy that runs beneath it.
They would talk a lot about legacy.
Like the dishes they made?
Yeah, but also like who they would work with, and what they would go on to do. Something would start somewhere, and then people would take that thing and they would take it somewhere else. So all these parts of an original restaurant, they would end up at a new restaurant, and that kind of thing, that would happen over and over again. All these parts of all these restaurants, they would sort of, they would find each other. Then new people would take those parts and they would put them into their restaurant. And the whole thing, it would start to happen all over again.
We saw at the end of Season 1 the way Kami understands his drive for culinary success. He put 110% into this career, went from good to great, because his brother Mike wouldn't let him work at the beef, and later wouldn't let him even go in. The viewer sees that Mike was embarrassed, thought he was below Kami, but Kami didn't see this. Kami thought that if he got even better, he'd earn that supposedly missing respect. Season 2 offered an alternate perspective, in painting a deeper picture of Kami's family life beyond Mike, in showing how chaotic and traumatic Kami's formative years must have been. It suggested one subconscious reason Kami went all in on the chef lifestyle was that food is something you can control. The kitchen has a routine. Everything outside the kitchen can be cut out. Or that's the idea. That's the fantasy the kitchen offers. And that side of things is what Season 3's premiere is interested in taking further. Over the course of Tomorrow's oscillations from past to present to other past and back again, as Kami gets better, more and more in control, audiovisual snippets from Fishes pop in. But the process Tomorrow shows us isn't simply Kami getting that control, it's him using it too.
Faster, please, Chef. Chef, let's fucking go, yeah? Chef, let's fucking go! Got it. Thank you, Chef.
Chefs, quiet.
On some level, Kami sees the kitchen as an isolated space, walled off, better than reality, pure, where perfection can be achieved and control can be accrued to plug whatever holes got drilled into his psyche back in Chicago. But Tomorrow's showing us that this purity doesn't exist. It's setting up the idea that legacy isn't just about what skills or ideas or dishes filter from one chef, one kitchen to another. It's also the flip side. Abuse is normalized, neuroses are spread, are mythologized. There is nothing that unique about the world of the kitchen. It's just another space for baggage and issues to coalesce and propagate in. Those walls are only visible from the inside. They don't really exist. And in Tomorrow, we're given the impression that the only thing that stops Kami from falling beneath the toxic cycles and eddies of the culinary world, from becoming Fields as he had become his prior mentors, is being forced to see that fact when reality comes crashing in. So this doesn't change Kami, doesn't develop his character, but it does explore his character, does orient him within the structure of the show, sets his portion of the bear stage for a journey. Will he see this? Will he see that shutting the world out, shutting Claire out, keeping those imagined walls up doesn't solve anything? Will he see the effect that doing so is having on his staff? Will he see that his legacy is shaping up nearer and nearer to Chef Fields's? Will he see that this is a problem? So here's my question. Is this not good TV? Is it not good TV due in part to the nonlinearity, the cinematography, the use of these mannerisms and affectations, all the details that put you in these characters' heads and create the space the episode gives you to sit in the vibes and tease all that out? Slate doesn't seem to think so, and that is half because it views the above elements as the trappings of goodness, not able to be good themselves in any meaningful way, but also, it seems, because they don't like what's teased out. Brace yourselves, long quote incoming. Last big one, I promise. Many of the world's most brilliant and ambitious artists are pretty unpleasant beings, Slate writes, in large part because the personality types that allow people to ascend to those heights don't lend themselves to what most of us consider cool or well-adjusted behavior. That's an interesting and difficult premise, and one well worth making a television show about. For Slate, The Bear had the potential to be a great show, but because of the show's penchant for melodrama, it can't bring itself to go there. Instead, continues Slate, it has to paint its protagonist as a trauma victim, a figure whose torment comes from his mother, his late brother, a particularly cruel mentor, and is in turn inflicted on those around him because he just can't help it. As such, rather than saying something challenging and probing about the nature of exceptional creativity, the show retreats into the most juvenile of fantasies on the subject, that being a fucked up person and artistic genius have a causal relationship to each other rather than a correlative one. I do have a point I want to make about this, but real quick, before I can, that isn't what the bear's saying, right? As we've seen, the idea of Kami as victim, both within the kitchen and without, is accompanied by the idea of Kami as victimizer, the idea that trauma perpetuates itself, and that despite the lofty perception he and his fellow chefs may have of the kitchen, this ground is as fertile as any other for these cycles to spin up in. But we can see in the presence of Chef Terry that genius in the bear is not umbilically tied to fucked upness, that their relationship is correlative. Notably, it's her we see spotting and trying to stamp out the toxic kitchen machismo creeping into Kami in Tomorrow. So the bear isn't saying you have to be fucked up to be a genius. Instead, the bear engages with that fantasy and questions the premise. What is genius? How is it maintained and measured? Maybe, suggests the bear, the standards we have for genius and the way we imagine it to operate aren't transcendent things, have been shaped in part by trauma and toxicity, and themselves play a role in continuing to engender those cycles. Consider the Michelin star. Earlier in the series, Sid wants one and Kami dismisses her. They're empty status symbols. You don't need one to be a good restaurant. When Kami finally commits to shooting for one, it's sort of a Faustian bargain. It's make-believe, dangerous, seductive make-believe, but in their situation, it turns out to be financially necessary make-believe. It's not until after the fridge, after Claire, as Kami's building those imagined walls back up, grabbing onto the mythology of the kitchen with both hands, that Kami's desire for that star becomes genuine, becomes need, and starts to open up those cracks between himself and the restaurant staff. To what degree is culinary prestige the valuing of damage? I would argue that this is indeed challenging, is a fresher and more probing basis for a show than the one Slate suggests, that exceptional creatives are basically just built diff. So Slate's wrong about what the bear's saying, but it's right that it's not saying the thing Slate wanted it to. And that might just be the key to this article as a whole. The key to making sense of those earlier critical gymnastics by which the bear's stylistic twitches not vibing with the writer gave rise to a model in which they were never good, were cloying and noxious, were only mistaken for being good by virtue of once hanging off a season with more momentum, and now remain in possession of enough empty pizzazz to trick an audience into defending a bad show. Because, rather fittingly, it's just a matter of taste. See, if you're able to put a framework in place that legitimizes your taste, turns things you don't like into noxious, juvenile flaws, then you're not going to put much thought into the things you dislike. It becomes far easier to view the flashes of Fishers and of Mike in Tomorrow as evidence of aimlessness, a crutch to avoid moving forward, as sleight of hand, than as thematically important breadcrumbs. If you wanted the show to say something in particular about genius, if you thought that that was the one thing it should have been about and it doesn't, you're not going to pay quite so much attention to what it is saying. And the people who do, the people who go looking for substance in the style or in the messaging and find it, they are all gonna look like rubes, dying in droves on the absurd hill that acclaimed TV show is good. They're wrong, you're right. Your critical criteria can never fail. They can only be failed. So that's that. Article bad, bear good, right? Well, no. The elephant in the room is, of course, that Slate is right about the biggest part of all this. Ironically, it's rather like the season of television in question. Insight and wrong-headedness coexist, and the presence of one runs the risk of blinding you to the other. Yes, these episodes are stylish, they still got that razzle-dazzle, and some are great stories in their own right. There are great episodes here, but when the credits roll on episode 10, you aren't quite satisfied. No, there isn't anything wrong with a heavier emphasis on non-linearity, on flashbacks, on vibes. These can and did make for beautiful episodes, great character explorations. This can all refocus viewer perceptions, chart new through lines wonderfully. But all this depth is worth a hell of a lot less if the payoff doesn't come. And all too often it didn't. Kami is set up for a banger of a journey in Tomorrow, but he's only made it a few steps along that road by the end. So what in fact's name are we to make of all this? We could try to outdo Slate, come up with some elaborate model that explains every nuance away, allows whichever inconvenient protrusions we fancy to fold in, and fits the bear into a box. Good, bad, was good, now isn't, something like that. But I don't think we need to. I think the nearest thing there is to an answer's been staring us in the face this whole time. Season 3 of The Bear is a bad season of good TV. Seriously, why not? I don't even see that as a contradiction. People say things are more than the sum of their parts all the time, right? This season is the opposite, it's less. It's like an album with a great sound, but a muddy mix. One with some great songs, but where the sequencing never quite clicks, and the brilliance remains theoretical. It's Lodger. Sorry, Lodger fans. Liking it in spite of that isn't wrong, but neither's holding that lack of focus against it. I don't think the music is now noxious, I don't think the camera work is now cloying, and I certainly don't think the performances are now lifeless. I think these elements are more or less as good as they've ever been, which is to say pretty damn good. I like the writing, at least at the level of dialogue, of scenes. And I would have been fine with the slower pace if it ended up getting us across the line. If it was able to have things cohere, have Kami, Richie, and Sid make those weirdly absent choices. And it does sting, because in a streaming-induced age where the season as a concept seems more and more to be in crisis, like the album before it, The Bear nailed it before. If this third year is an insubstantial piece of haute cuisine, Season 1 in particular was a delicious, filling beef sandwich. So we know the people behind this show understand pacing and resolution, and that's a big part of what makes this such valid criticism. I know that I'll rewatch The Bear Season 3, and I know that I'll be blown away again by the craftsmanship and the emotion and the luster of all those individual pieces. I also know that I am going to be a bit disappointed all over again with how they fit together. Alright, off you go, video's over. Oh, you were hoping for a clearly defined resolution? You wanted me to tie all this together in some unforeseen yet satisfying way? Nah, we're done. Didn't all come together perfectly, I guess. It's not quite my Fallout video, this. But I think I did have some good observations earlier. And I don't think stalling out a little at the end negates them, proves I was conning you all along by appearing to have it all figured out. Does it? God, that was a super wanky ending, sorry. But if you do want to see more of my stuff, why not hit subscribe? And if you want to see even more stuff, there's a whole library of exclusive videos over on my Patreon. Check them out. Thanks again to Aura for sponsoring this video, and huge thanks to all of my current backers on screen now, especially to Hanan, Daniel Goldhorn, Magath, Something Capitalism Bad, Thomas R, and Weirdy Beardy.